Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 1503A, and today's date is February 20th, 2018, and the title of the episode is, This is Where the Next Economic Crisis is Hiding. Let's get into the economic collapse financial news. Now, we have been seeing a lot of stores where their brick and mortar sales, they haven't been doing well. We've been seeing the online sales, they haven't been doing well. And each store continually pops up that says, oh, they're not going to be able to make it. They're going to have to declare bankruptcy. Online sales is not what they thought it was going to be. And Walmart is out there now. And they have a disappointing fourth quarter. E-commerce sales, they have slowed. They only rose about 23% in the fourth quarter. And we have to remember, this is during the holiday season. This is down from an average of about 50% in the last three quarters. So this is not too good for Walmart. We also see that their earnings have missed, and it looks like things are rapidly deteriorating very, very quickly. Now, we know that a lot of people use food stamps within Walmart to purchase their groceries. But again, people who are buying online aren't using food stamps. So we can see that there are things that are breaking down, and when people don't have jobs, when people have a difficult time finding jobs, when their retail stores are closing and there's 100,000 jobs that are just completely being wiped out and many corporations that are continually laying off, you need to start to think to yourself, do these unemployment numbers make any sense whatsoever? And we've gone over it many, many times. And just because we have a new president doesn't mean anything has changed. Nothing has changed. They're still using the same exact calculation as they did before. Now, before we were saying that it was completely manipulated. It's still manipulated. And the jobs just aren't there right now. There's a lot of people that are in a huge amount of debt. And the debt levels, they keep growing much faster than the overall economy. I mean, think about it. We haven't had a year of 3% growth for the U.S. economy since the middle of the Bush administration. But we keep borrowing money as if there's no tomorrow. Much of the focus has been on the exploding debt of the federal government, and that is definitely something that we need to look at. But when we look at individuals, the individual debt level, U.S. consumers, they've been extremely irresponsible as well. Why? Because this is the only way people can survive. When the dollar loses value and you need more and more of these dollars to pay for your merchandise, you resort to credit. When your job doesn't give you a raise, you need to resort to credit. When you can't find a job, you need to resort to credit. When you find a new job but it's making a lot less than you were and your bills are still the same, you resort to credit. This is what we are seeing right now. In fact, one new survey has found that more than 80% of all American adults are currently in debt. 80.9% of baby boomers are in debt. 79.9% of Gen Xers in debt. 81.5% of millennials, they are in debt. For most of us, it starts very early. We're told that going into debt to get the college education would not be a problem because we would be able to pay those loans off with good jobs. You know, those jobs that you get right after graduation where you're getting a nice salary, but it's not happening. Those good jobs never really materialize. And many people are saying, now what do I do? They get part-time jobs. And now millions of former college graduates are drowning in debt. A study released Friday by the Brookings Institution finds that most borrowers who left school owing at least $50,000 in student loans in 2010 had failed to pay down any of their debt 4 years later. Instead, their balances had on average risen by 5% as interest accrued on their debt. As of 2014, there were about 5 million borrowers with large loan balances, and out of 40 million Americans total with student debt. Large balance borrowers represented about 17% of student borrowers leaving college or grad school in 2014, up from 2% of all borrowers in 1990 after adjusting for inflation. Local and state and federal government debt levels are at all record highs right now. And it is now being projected that our national debt will hit about $30 trillion by 2028. And those projections are probably very optimistic. It's probably going to be a lot higher than that if we ever make it that far under this system. Now, we can see that there are a lot of things lurking in the darkness where these things could kick off the next economic crisis. The Federal Reserve reported, most recently 2 weeks ago, U.S. consumer non-mortgage debt has never been higher as of December 31st, 2017. U.S. households had a record $1 trillion of credit card revolving loans, a record $1.3 trillion of auto loans, and a record $1.5 trillion of student loans. Now, among these, credit card and auto loans in particular have been experiencing accelerated delinquencies. As a result, finance companies and banks have been increasing bad debt provisions to build balance sheet reserves due to expectations of rising defaults. And we can definitely see this is what's been happening. Now, the larger banks, they have been dominating the credit card issuance, and they've been focusing on prime and subprime consumers. And they've been focusing on these two groups since the great financial crisis. And they have enjoyed a prolonged period of low charge-off rates concurrent with the Fed's almost decade-long program of ZIRP. However, since 2015, the Fed has progressively raised interest rates from ZIRP, while NCOs at the larger banks have started to rise. And we can see right now that the interest rates are rising. America's smaller banks, those not in the top 100 by asset size, that have experienced in just the recent months a surge in charge-off deterioration, which at 7.9% is on par with the last financial crisis. In other words, to find where the next consumer credit crisis hides and will erupt next, ignore the big banks and completely take your focus and focus it on the smaller ones. Now, this spike in net charge-offs among smaller banks has gone largely unnoticed by the general media, which has traditionally focused on aggregate numbers and also the larger bank. And they completely don't even look at the smaller banks. And we can see right now the smaller banks, they are going to be in trouble once this starts to accelerate. And if we look at the U.S. Bank credit, loans, and securities, we can see back in the year of 2008, we hit around 63%. Right now, we are approaching 65%. And this is what this is loans and securities to GDP. And we are way above where we were back in 2008. Now, this could be the next kickoff to the crisis, just like the subprime securities, where no one was looking at them saying they were AAA, everything's fine, and then we come to find out that they were complete garbage. The same thing here. Yes, the larger banks, they're taken care of, but the smaller banks, they're going to be in trouble. And it looks like this could be where the next economic crisis is really kicked off, unless the central bank goes ahead and brings down the economy themselves because they want to control it. But if you're looking for a black swan, this could be where it starts. Now, the BLS and the government, they're all out there, the central bank, they're trying to convince us that there's no inflation whatsoever. And they're saying over the last 20 years, we've seen about 55.6% inflation. That's it, which means it's about 2.4% annually over that period of time. Now, the BLS shows the cost of housing up about 56% over the last 20 years. Now, let's take a closer look at this to see if what they're telling us is actually true. Now, the average new home cost back in 1997 was around $175,000. The average new home in 2017 cost about $380,000. And if we do the math, that's about a 117% increase. The average monthly rent in 1997 was about $576. In 2017, it was $1,021, 77% increase. Housing is the biggest weighting in the CPI calculation. Since using actual cost increases would show at least 90% increase in housing, the BLS created a fake calculation called owner's equivalent rent, which no one can question. So basically, they manipulated these numbers to make us believe that inflation is really not that bad, because that's how you get fake housing inflation. But you just look at the numbers and you can see, yes, there's inflation all over the place. Actually, look at new cars. The average price of a new car in 1997 was $19,214. The average price of a new car in 2017 was $33,560. Does that strike you as a 0% increase? That's what they're trying to tell us. Actually, it's about 75%. But they use this word hedonic, a hedonic adjustment, to get you to 0%, saying, oh, if you have heated seats and you have cup holders, it made your drive to work $14,000 cheaper. This is how they're trying to convince you that you're not seeing any type of inflation. And what that really means is that the dollar is losing value very, very quickly, because they don't want you to see. That's the whole part of their illusion. It's to keep everyone in the dark, and they try to continually push out garbage with manipulated data to make you believe that you're not seeing this, because we've done the calculation and we're telling you there's no inflation. Cars really didn't go up in price. Housing didn't go up in price. You're not seeing food move up. You're not seeing any of this stuff. It's all an illusion because we calculated it for you and we're not seeing it. I mean, this is how stupid they think the American people are. But everyone can feel it, because when you go to purchase something, you're like, how much is this car now? How far does my dollar get me? Nowhere. Now, we see that certain banks, they're in trouble. The bailed out mega bank, RBS, hasn't had a year in the black since 2007. Now, 2 weeks ago, this bank was brought up on charges that they were forging customer signatures, that they trained staff to do this, and the senior management completely denied the whole thing. And they're saying that this never happened. Well, it looks like management is going to have to walk back those denials. And we can see that they were forging documents. They trained their staff to do so. And we see that a retired teacher, Jean McKay, came forward with paperwork that clearly showed her signature was forged on a bank document. The bank refused to admit any wrongdoing, although it did agree to refund her fees as well as interest. For Mrs. McKay, that was not enough. She wanted an apology and an admission of guilt from her bank. Now, years later, and with the public's attention fixed squarely on RBS forgery scandal, she's finally got it. A graphologist recently confirmed that the signatures on the document are indeed not a match. The bank's response was immediate. It apologized to Mrs. McKay and offered her a whopping $500 in compensation. It also admitted committing forgery, but claimed it was an isolated incident. And eventually what we're most likely going to find out that it wasn't. Just look at the banks and what they've done in the past. You could see why people would like to go to cryptocurrencies, where they would like to bypass these banking institutions, because they're not in it for their customers. They're in it for themselves. And it looks like they're prepared and ready to do whatever they have to do to make sure that their institutions stay afloat. And we could see right now with the robo-signing, with everything that's been going on in the past, with Wells Fargo, with mortgages, and everything else, we can see that people are losing trust in the banking system, especially now that you get no interest on your money inside the bank. What is the reason to use the bank? What, to pay your bills? You really don't need a bank for that. We can get off that system and move to something completely different. But what we're seeing right now is a complete and utter breakdown of the system. And we're seeing that there are many different black swans lurking in the dark, which are just going to come right out. And we can see that the central banks, they've been pushing their agenda to bring down the economy before a black swan hits. So we have a lot of things happening all at once. We see banks, once again, are dishonest. The central bankers, they're in it for profit. And all of this is coming to a head right now. We can see that their time is coming to an end. This is why we have the birth of cryptocurrency. This is why people are starting to move towards cryptocurrency. This is why corporations and employers are starting to look at cryptocurrencies, because you can do almost everything today without a bank, without the central bank. There's no reason for them. And guess what? The central bank, the banks, they don't like this. They don't like it at all, and this is why they've been trying to stop it. But we can see right now that we're headed towards this transition. It's either going to be a central banking transition, which is going to hurt a lot of people, which is going to keep them in control, or we're going to be heading towards a cryptocurrency type of transition where the people take control of the currency once again. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.